Welcome to the program today. My name is Mondo Gonzalez, and I am here with a very interesting update from Brent Miller Jr. And so welcome, Brent.
Thank you, Mondo. It's an absolute pleasure to be on today.
Yeah, it's great to finally talk to you and chat with you. And for those in our audience, we have so many new watchers and subscribers and audience members. Kind of share with them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm the writer, director, and producer of Before the Wrath, which was the #1 Christian film for most of 2020. It was released in major retail, and it was redubbed for release in over 100 theaters overseas in South Korea. And as a film about the rapture and the return of Christ, that sort of topic usually doesn't penetrate a mainstream audience the way that Before the Wrath did. With the reviews and the attention it received, it ended up spreading through thousands of churches worldwide and truly reignited dialogue for talking about the rapture in churches and with certain portions within the church that had previously marginalized the topic. They never talked about prophecy or the rapture or the return of Christ, surprisingly. So since the film released 2 years ago in 2020, we've had a lot of people watching what Ingenuity Films, in which I'm one of the founders of, was working on next. And it's been under tight wraps for the last 2 years. In fact, it's a film that we were working on alongside Before the Wrath. And in many ways, this next film is picking up exactly where Before the Wrath left off. And we're working with a lot of the same ancient anthropologists, some of the same theologians and pastors like Jack Hibbs, Barry Stagner, a lot of people involved in this project. So I'm so excited to be here, first on Prophecy Watchers, to announce the title of this new film, which is Eating with the Enemy, which is about Jesus Christ at the Last Supper and breaking bread with Judas at the Last Supper, and to finally reveal the new trailer for this upcoming film. So I brought that with me. So if you want to play it.
Let's do it. This is great.
Right.
This world has taken everything but the breath in my lungs. And now it seeks to claim the one thing I have left.
Judas. Judas. Come in. I've been waiting for you.
If he really was a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him.
We are to meet tonight in a secret place. I can tell you where he'll be.
I will lay down my life for your sake. I will die for you.
See your heart. And there is no greater love than to sacrifice your life for a friend. And you are all my friends.
Well, obviously the filming and the quality is superior and excellent on this. Kind of share with us a little bit, if you can, just like any connections between, you know, the continuity of the. I know you can only say so much, but kind of share what you can. I guess I'll ask it that way.
Yeah, it's we're still pretty early in post-production. We are shooting for a release by the end of the year. And just to mention, Kevin Sorbo is back to narrate. This is the biggest production that we've had to date. So it's been genuinely a pleasure to that the Lord has allowed me, and a privilege to direct and write this film, which I know is going to impact millions of lives. But as I stated, it really does pick up where Before the Wrath left off. So it's a lot of the same theologians. And it dives, in Before the Wrath, there are several scenes about the Last Supper in relation to the Galilean wedding and the rapture and his return. So what Eating with the Enemy does, it sort of goes back and it dives deeper into the Last Supper itself. In fact, the findings in this film reveal what could very well be the most important prophetic warning Jesus Christ ever left to the last days church. And I know that is a monumental statement. But I genuinely feel it's true. And this is based on the actual scriptural events that culminated in the final days of Jesus's life before the crucifixion. It all culminated on the night of the Last Supper. And most people are familiar of the Last Supper, but they don't understand the depths of how important it really is for the church and for our individual lives. So we have to remember that after Judas left to betray Jesus, Jesus left his disciples with a new commandment, to love one another as we love, as he loved us. This is monumental. So many pastors and Christians glass over this. To love one another as you have loved us, and it sounds like good advice, etc. But you have to understand that Jesus fulfilled the law for everything in the Old Testament in his first coming. But here's a monumental moment, mere hours before his crucifixion. I mean, at the very last minute, and he gives his disciples a new commandment. So we stop, and just like in the same vein of Before the Wrath, where we don't say when's the rapture, but why does it have to happen? We carry that same kind of ideology into this new film, and we say, leaving this new commandment to his disciples, it's actually monumentally significant. Why this commandment? Why then? And so the answers in this film are genuinely life-changing.
Yeah. No, it's so amazing too, because you think of, really the whole upper room discourse, and there's a lot of teaching there, and John 13:35, it's actually the tagline on my email, because they will know that you're my disciples by your love for one another. And so you see the power of the last words. You see Jesus's comments and making these phrases, I give you an old commandment, but it's a new commandment. All these variety of things which are powerful. And the trailer is tremendous. I mean, there's even this 2 or 3 minutes here. It's extremely engaging, and I felt myself getting drawn in just to the character. I mean, here we have this guy who is a villain, a historical villain. But speak about, just in general, about the power of film in bringing something like this. You did it in the other movie, Before the Wrath. Speak about the power of film of bringing things to life and to engage the average person.
Yeah, well, film is the biggest medium there is today. It reaches the most people worldwide and has become the most captivating. I mean, a picture has always been worth 1,000 words, so a film is worth 1,000,000. And we find that we reach much larger audiences with all types of backgrounds and nationalities strictly through film. And personally speaking, I'm a terrible negotiator and debater. So, I would say I'm pretty much like the average Christian, where whenever you're trying to tell a friend or a loved one about Christ or the gospel, you always walk away, and an hour later you go, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that. It always comes to you too late. So for me as a film director, it's a way to really put in to pray and pray for the Lord's wisdom and knowledge, and to really meditate on exactly the best foot and the best information to put forward, so that you have a captive audience, as they're watching, and it answers all their questions. So it really has become a powerful tool in ministry, unlike any other.
It's amazing too that when you think about, there's been a lot of focus on Judas. You have the Gospel of Judas, being popular, within the last 10 years, but even the way that you framed it, this idea, the Last Supper, that's kind of the context. But to have such a moment of Jesus loving them to the end, and to have this character there, it really brings a lot of theological ideas just in general, doesn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, I wasn't going to get into this. Well played. But I wasn't going to get into this today because it's probably a little too soon. I'm going to have a couple unhappy people with me here. But before I've spoken about how eschatology has become very divisive within the church, and it is unbelievably marginalized. By our last projections working with Lifeway Research, it's been marginalized in 98% of churches for various reasons I've gotten into before. But surprisingly, what's even more divisive is the topic of Judas. And that was something that surprised me a lot early on in this research when we're looking at the prophecies of the Last Supper and how it all culminated that night. We're looking at Judas, and we're working with focus groups with various denominations around the country. And because Judas represents one's foundational core belief in what is salvation, what does it mean to be saved? We receive, we would talk to 100 different Christians and receive 100 different answers on what it is they believe that belief in Jesus is. And therefore, that means that the church is unbelievably divided on what is salvation, which is the most critical topic you could discuss in your entire life. And we find that so many of these answers were actually revealed during the Last Supper, and yet it's a part of the gospel that not many pastors actually dive into and study. We found most Christians and most pastors were really unaware of the eschatology and the depths of what took place in the Last Supper. In fact, that's why this film was so critical to be made in these last days. And to really understand why the Last Supper is so important to the church today, you have to experience what happened for yourself as a witness amongst the disciples that very night. That's why we had to do this in a big budget film. And what you find, without going into too much detail here, is that Judas is actually the key to it all. And like I stated, nobody wants to talk about him. He's very divisive. But most people believe they know everything there is about Judas. But it turns out that most Christians, most pastors, and previously, even speaking for myself, know virtually nothing about him. And ironically, eating with the enemy isn't really about Judas at all. But he is the key to unlocking what I would call a forgotten parable. He's a living parable that is the key to understanding what it means to believe in Jesus. And if I can ramble on just for a minute longer, I'm sure there's a lot of Christians that say, well, we all know what it means to believe in Jesus. We just refer to John 3:16 most of the time. But you know what? Working with different research organizations for this film, including Pew Research and the Barna Group, when you have 80% of self-proclaimed Christians that now believe, right now in the United States, that 80% that there are other paths to heaven outside of Jesus Christ, asking the question, what does it mean to believe in Jesus, is a very important topic. It's a critical topic, and it's a crisis that's happening in the church right now that not many people are addressing.
Yeah, no, there's no greater question than coming to that realization. Jesus would say, if you gain the whole world, but you lose your soul, what did you really profit? You profited nothing. One of the things that I found interesting, and just again, I'm not asking for any details, but just the theology of the Bible, I'm sure we're free to talk about that, in the sense that what I felt too is oftentimes as a pastor, people just throw a label on Judas, but yet I think all of us have the capability to be a Judas. We betray the Lord every day in our personal life, maybe not in the grand scale like this, but I think it helps us to get into all the characters and the personalities of each of the disciples. And to me, it's compelling, I think, for sure.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. Eating with the enemy, there's a lot of flashbacks to the events that culminated on the night of the Last Supper. So it's not just the Last Supper that's taking place. We have scenes with Mary Bethany, Mary Magdalene. We compare and contrast the heart and actions of Peter the night of the Last Supper to really expose, this living parable within the scriptures that so many Christians have forgotten. I absolutely agree. And Judas, a lot of people just think like, oh, he's a betrayer. Yeah, he absolutely was. But he's a lot more than that. We forget that he's a disciple that followed Jesus but never received him. And how much of the church today, especially with the statistic, that I just revealed, how much of the church today is following Jesus but hasn't received him? So yeah, Judas is an important character to look at in this film, along with so many of the others, along with Jesus's new commandment during the Last Supper. I mean, it all is, they're all pieces to a puzzle that connect to which reveals a historic conclusion in this film that is so emotionally charged and powerful, genuinely about the love of Christ, which is really the core of the meaning of this film, and about what it means to receive his salvation, that I genuinely believe is not only going to wake up huge portions of the church, which is so critically needed in these last days, but is going to be one of the most powerful ministry tools for anybody who has friends or family that even proclaims to know Christ or follow Christ or even reject Christ, that may not understand what it is to believe in him.
That is just, it could not be said better than that, because I think of, if we were to put ourselves in the ministry of Jesus, in Matthew 7, very early on, he's talking, he says, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, but he'll say, depart from me, I never knew you. But in Matthew 7, 21 through 23, but one of the things that they say is, well, we casted out demons in your name, we did this miraculous things. And I can't imagine that when Judas was walking along and he was participating with the rest of the boys, he was participating in some of these miraculous things. You see that in Luke 10 and other places, that here's a guy that was there from the beginning, possibly doing miracles, but yet ends up in that situation. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it'll force us to examine, because we're right at the moment when we expect the rapture to happen. We expect the wrath of God, the day of the Lord, to begin. And yet there's a lot of people that profess to know, but maybe they're not all the way there. And so the goal, really, my hope would be something like this would help this self-examination to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings up several interesting questions, such as not only what does it mean to believe, but what's the difference between a desire to believe into Jesus versus genuinely believing into Jesus? I mean, these are life-impacting questions that not many churches are discussing. So it's very critical in this day.
Well, Brent, hey, I appreciate your time. The goal here was to get it out to our audience, to let them know about the trailer. Where can people find out more information for now?
We have some information up at eatingwiththeenemy.com. But as I stated, we're still pretty early on in post-production. So I would suggest that people keep an eye on Prophecy Watchers. Okay. So I'm hoping to be in the studio real soon to be able to discuss this further.
Yes, look forward to it. Thanks, Brent, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And for those that are watching, again, we sneak preview here for the trailer. I hope you go and watch it even a few times. You'll find it extremely compelling, as I did. But we appreciate you watching, and we will see you next time.